Yeah, they're really important as we focus around the connected consumer. And that's really what's changing within the industry. We're hugely challenged with growth and how to grow. And consumer connectivity is opening up new opportunities. And to get to those consumers, you can't necessarily drive them to you. So you have to be in a position to bring what you do to them in in new ways. You know, the historical way was kind of an advertising disruption type of model, and I think we're entering a time where it's really more about utility and service, and brands are really about that. At their roots, they're really, really about that for the most part, and APIs present the opportunity to execute against that opportunity. It's, in some ways, it's kind of that simple, but it's sort of that hard at the same time. It comes back to that growth question. Actually, I pretty much stepped out of the role I was in, which was I was the CIO for the company, global CIO for the company, had a number of strategy kind of responsibilities as well, sort of did things, more transformational things that didn't really fit well within the, you know, kind of the operational structure of the business. And that was my legacy at McCormick over the time I was there. And so about 4 years ago, I would have been there about 11 years at that point. And we started to grind a little bit on growth. And our strategy for growth, our model, which had worked really well from the late 90s into into 2010 timeframe, was it was largely predicated around gaining distribution. You know, there were still places that you couldn't buy our products, and by filling in those places, that was accounting for a lot of our growth, and a little bit of innovation, a little bit of acquisition, and it worked. As we've seen over the last few years, we're more saturated from a distribution standpoint. We have to increase consumption. Now, the good news is we have opportunity to do that. We have a really fundamental strategy question around how are we going to grow in these, particularly in our Western markets where we're really established. And we just sat down and took a really hard look at what could we do. And we looked at a series of trends around the connected consumer and some of the behaviors that were emerging. We found that consumers were looking for more variety in what they were eating. We had answers to those questions. We could meet needs that were very there and present at scale, but doing it digitally was where the difference was. And so it was just this need to answer that strategic question of how you're going to grow. So that organic growth is really the engine that you have to feed. And it was just really taking a serious look at what could we do, were there trends that presented opportunities for us different from the past. That's how we got started. I would say where we're at is we understand the value to the consumer. We know it meets a consumer need. We know that it creates a stacked win for the different participants in the ecosystem. It meets the consumer need. They get food solutions that they'll love. Perfect. It meets the McCormick need because consumers are cooking with more flavor. They're bringing more variety into their food choices. Our ship rises with that tide. The third piece of it in the stacked win is for the retailer. You're causing consumers to think more in terms of solutions. The data we have suggests that basket grows. Okay, so now you've solved the challenge of growth for McCormick, you've solved the challenge of growth for the retailer, and you've delighted the consumer. So we've proven on a small scale that that's how it comes together. Our challenge now is just get the services distributed as far and as fast to every possible consumer touch point that we possibly can, because that's really where it works the most magic for the consumer, because it's learning about the consumer through the context of each of those touch points, whether it's looking at a recipe site or I'm in store and I'm trying to figure out, I find out that chicken's on sale this week and what do I do? So the challenge is just how do you get big fast? As it turns out, Apogee's is core to being successful at achieving the objective that we just talked about around scaling, right? It just basically allows us, that relationship allows us to focus on creating the consumer experience, not creating a whole bunch of architecture to deliver it, right? Which if we had to do that, if we'd taken a different path and say, it's an API, we can write that, we'd be in a very different position today, because today we can go build partnerships, and I know we can deliver service at scale to those partnerships. We can measure what we're doing, we can understand where we have bottlenecks that we have to resolve, and we can focus almost all of our energy on building a great consumer experience. So we went from part of the stack that we knew that we needed to, wow, this is a really strategic relationship, and it's something that we need to do a lot more with that relationship, because I think now we're becoming aware of what all of that expertise can do if we're smart enough to take advantage of it.